The studio lights burned a little hotter that morning, as if they sensed something was about to fracture. Oprah Winfrey sat at the table with her familiar calm, hands folded, eyes steady, listening as Joy Behar leaned forward with a sharp smile and a sharper question. The audience laughed at first, assuming it was another playful jab, another view-style spark meant to entertain. But Oprah didn't laugh. She paused. In that pause, the room shifted. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured, almost gentle, yet every word carried weight. She talked about respect, about conversations turning into spectacles, about how power is often disguised as humor. Joy tried to interrupt, waving it off, but Oprah didn't raise her voice. She simply continued, peeling back the moment layer by layer. The laughter died. Cameras zoomed in. The audience realized they weren't watching banter anymore, they were witnessing a line being drawn. Joy leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, eyebrows arched in disbelief. She attempted a joke, something quick and dismissive, but it landed flat, bouncing off the quiet tension now gripping the room. Oprah's gaze never left her. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cold. It was something far more unsettling, patient, unwavering, and honest. Oprah spoke about the responsibility of platforms, about how words echo long after the applause fades. She mentioned conversations she'd had behind closed doors, moments when humor had crossed into cruelty, when interruption became erasure. No names were spoken, yet every word felt uncomfortably specific. The hosts around the table shifted in their seats. One glanced toward the producer's booth. Another nervously straightened her papers, unsure whether to jump in or stay silent. The audience, once chatty and reactive, sat frozen. Even the cameramen seemed to move more slowly, carefully framing each expression, each micro-reaction. Joy attempted to reclaim control, cutting in again, her voice louder this time, more defensive. She insisted this was television, that people were too sensitive, that laughter was the point. Oprah nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the argument, then responded with a question so simple it felt devastating. "Who gets to decide who's laughing?" she asked. That question hung in the air like a held breath. Joy opened her mouth, closed it, then scoffed. She shifted in her chair, tapping her pen against the table, a nervous habit she hadn't realized she still had. The audience murmured softly, a ripple of discomfort spreading through the studio. Oprah continued, explaining how humor can uplift or diminish, how intent doesn't erase impact. She spoke of women who had sat across from her over the decades, brilliant voices talked over, dismissed as punchlines. Her tone never accused, yet it illuminated everything. Joy's smile hardened. She leaned forward now, meeting Oprah's gaze with defiance. "So now I'm the villain," she snapped, half laughing, half challenging. A few scattered chuckles surfaced, but they quickly died when Oprah responded, calm as ever. She said this wasn't about villains or heroes. It was about accountability. About listening when someone tells you the joke hurt. About knowing when to pause instead of pushing through for applause. Each sentence felt like it was gently but firmly tightening a knot Joy hadn't noticed forming. The producers signaled a commercial break. Red lights blinked, but Oprah didn't stop speaking. Joy noticed. Everyone noticed. The control room hesitated, unsure whether cutting away would make things worse. Oprah acknowledged the break with a brief glance toward the cameras, then finished her thought. She spoke about walking away when conversations stopped being productive, about choosing growth over ego. Her words weren't sharp, but they were final. Joy exhaled loudly, pushing her chair back an inch. The sound of its legs scraping against the floor echoed more than it should have. She laughed again, but this time it was brittle. "Wow," she said, shaking her head. "So this is what this is now." Oprah met her reaction with silence, the kind that invites reflection rather than retaliation. The audience leaned forward, sensing something was about to tip. Joy's frustration spilled out in quick bursts, about being misunderstood, about decades of doing this job, about not needing a lecture. The more she spoke, the more uneven her voice became. Oprah didn't interrupt. That, somehow, was the hardest part. When Joy finally stopped, breathless, Oprah responded softly, saying that experience doesn't make anyone immune to feedback. That longevity should deepen wisdom, not harden it. That walking away from a moment can sometimes be the strongest statement. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker. Joy looked around, searching for backup, for a laugh, for a nod. She found none. Even the audience, usually eager to react, sat in a stunned hush. Oprah folded her hands again, returning to the posture she'd held at the start, as if the conversation had come full circle. She said nothing more, but her silence spoke volumes. Joy stared at the table, jaw clenched. The pen slipped from her fingers and clattered softly against the surface. That small sound seemed to break whatever fragile balance remained. She pushed her chair back fully this time and stood. The movement was abrupt, almost defiant. Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras scrambled to adjust. Joy muttered something under her breath, too quiet for microphones to catch clearly, then looked straight ahead, avoiding Oprah's eyes. As she walked off set, the studio remained silent, stunned by the suddenness of it all. Oprah stayed seated, composed, her expression unreadable but heavy with understanding. The hosts exchanged glances, unsure what to say, unsure how to move forward. The red light blinked again, signaling the return from break, but nothing about the moment felt rehearsed or controlled anymore. Part 1 ended not with shouting or chaos, but with the quiet shock of a decision made in real time, under unforgiving lights. The audience knew they had witnessed something rare, a moment where words didn't explode, but instead dismantled, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hide behind. The silence Joy left behind didn't fade when the cameras cut. It lingered, thick and uncomfortable, settling into the corners of the studio like dust no one dared disturb. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The hosts sat frozen, hands folded, eyes darting between each other and the empty chair Joy had abandoned. Oprah remained still, her posture composed, but there was a quiet gravity about her now, as if she understood exactly what had just unfolded and what it would mean once the world caught up. When the show returned from commercial, the applause sign flickered uncertainly, then dimmed. The audience didn't need instruction anymore. They were fully aware that whatever came next wouldn't be business as usual. One of the hosts cleared her throat and attempted to reset the conversation, thanking Oprah for being there, her voice noticeably unsteady. Oprah nodded politely, offering a small smile that felt more like reassurance than triumph. She didn't gloat. She didn't explain. She simply sat, present, allowing the moment to breathe. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled. Phones buzzed. Assistants whispered urgently into headsets. Social media monitors began lighting up with notifications faster than anyone could read them. Clips were already spreading, paused on Oprah's calm expression, on Joy's abrupt exit, on the stunned faces frozen mid-reaction. What had just happened was no longer confined to the studio. It was spilling outward, gaining momentum with every second. Oprah finally spoke again, her voice softer now, reflective. She talked about discomfort being a teacher, about moments that challenge us often becoming the ones that change us most. She made it clear she hadn't come to attack or embarrass anyone. She had come to speak honestly. Her words felt less like a conclusion and more like an invitation, to think, to listen, to reconsider how conversations are held in public spaces. The audience listened intently, some nodding, some blinking back emotion they hadn't expected to feel on a daytime talk show. When the episode ended, the applause was subdued but sincere. Oprah stood, hugged the hosts one by one, and exited the stage without fanfare. There were no victory smiles, no raised fists. Just a quiet departure that mirrored her entrance. In contrast, the empty chair at the table felt louder than any argument could have been. Backstage, Joy sat alone in her dressing room, the muffled sounds of the studio echoing faintly through the walls. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her phone, scrolling through messages that were already pouring in. Some were supportive, telling her she'd been brave, that she'd stood her ground. Others were harsher, questioning her tone, her refusal to listen, her choice to walk out. Joy tossed the phone onto the couch and stared at her reflection in the mirror. For the first time that day, there was no audience, no laughter to lean on, no quick comeback to deploy. Outside, Oprah paused before stepping into her car. A reporter called her name, asking for a comment, a reaction, anything. Oprah smiled gently and shook her head. "Sometimes the moment says enough," she replied, before the door closed behind her. That single sentence would later be replayed endlessly, dissected and debated, but in that instant, it felt less like a soundbite and more like a boundary. By evening, the internet was ablaze. Hashtags trended. Commentators picked sides. Some praised Oprah's composure, calling it a masterclass in grace under pressure. Others accused her of overstepping, of turning a talk show disagreement into a moral reckoning. Joy Behar's name dominated headlines, often paired with words like walkout and showdown. Yet amid the noise, one detail stood out to many viewers: the absence of shouting, the lack of insults, the power of restraint. The following morning, The View aired with a noticeably altered tone. Joy's seat remained empty, officially attributed to time off, but no one believed it was that simple. The host spoke carefully, acknowledging the previous episode without rehashing it. There was an unspoken understanding that something fundamental had shifted. Conversations felt slower, more deliberate, as if everyone was newly aware of how fragile these moments could be. Joy, meanwhile, broke her silence with a short statement released through her publicist. It was measured, defensive in places, reflective in others. She spoke about feeling blindsided, about standing by her style, about needing space. Missing from the statement was any mention of Oprah by name. That omission spoke volumes. The public reaction was mixed, but even critics noted something different. Joy sounded shaken, forced to confront a moment she couldn't laugh away. Oprah never issued a statement. She didn't need to. Her response came weeks later in a quiet interview on a different platform, where she spoke broadly about dialogue, about how growth often arrives uninvited. She didn't reference the show directly, but anyone listening could hear the echo of that morning. Walking away can mean many things, she said. Sometimes it's avoidance. Sometimes it's self-preservation. And sometimes, it's an invitation to return differently. That line lingered with audiences long after the interview ended. Eventually, Joy did return to television, though not immediately to the same chair, not with the same energy. When she finally addressed the incident on air, her tone was noticeably altered, less sharp, more cautious. She admitted the moment had forced her to reflect, even if she didn't fully agree with how it unfolded. It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't a surrender. But it was a crack in armor that had seemed unbreakable for years. As for Oprah, the moment quietly joined the long list of instances where her presence alone had shifted a room. It wasn't remembered for drama alone, but for the rare sight of power exercised without domination. No shouting, no insults, just a calm refusal to participate in something that no longer served the truth. In the end, the legacy of that day wasn't about who won or lost. It was about what happens when silence meets accountability, when humor is questioned instead of celebrated blindly, when walking away becomes louder than staying. Viewers would debate it for years, replaying the clips, choosing sides, rewriting the narrative in their own image. But those who had been in the studio that morning remembered it differently. They remembered the heat of the lights, the weight of the pause, the sound of a chair scraping back, and the unsettling realization that sometimes the most powerful exchanges aren't explosive at all. Sometimes, they are quiet enough to make everyone listen.